We are live for another episode of our local spotlight here on the Treasure Coast of Florida on the Arrow Title Services Facebook and YouTube channel. Today's guest I'm really excited to introduce is Larry Lammers, and he is with Cardinal Engineering Associates here on the Treasure Coast, and is super excited. We're really excited to bring on this whole segment of local spotlight because there's so many businesses in our local community that really add to what the Treasure Coast is, and it's just great to know those local people that are really doing amazing things out there. So thank you, Larry, for coming on and sharing what you do. I'm excited to get into it. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Thank you so much, Lucy. I really feel fortunate and honored to be a part of this segment. I think it's exciting what you're doing here. Obviously, work local, stay local, buy local is something that I think would really benefit our community if we all really gravitate towards that idea. And usually there is a push towards that, but we can always do better, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just getting the feedback and the questions open so that people can ask questions to these local business owners about things that they do. And I think that what's really unique about what you do is that I feel like a lot of people don't have a personal connection to an engineer that they can ask questions to. So I'm really excited to share you and what you do with everyone, and how you can help them in any aspects that they have coming up or how. So
Yeah, and that's what we're here for. We're here to help solve problems and answer people's questions.
absolutely. So for those of you guys who are tuning in, just make sure that if you have any questions, you can ask your questions in the comments and we can answer them. But Larry, I want you to go ahead and introduce yourself. What do you do? What does Cardinal Engineering do? And just give us a brief showdown of what your company is about.
I appreciate that. So again, my name is Larry Lammers. I am the vice president at Cardinal Engineering and Associates. We're an engineering firm and we specialize in buildings. So buildings have different systems. They have mechanical systems, they have electrical systems, plumbing systems, and obviously the structures that actually hold them up. So we cover all those. So pretty much any kind of engineering related to a building, we have skills, knowledge, and we work in that field.
Awesome. That's really cool. So, can you describe what is an engineer? Like, what is that their core aspect of their job? And when someone's looking for an engineer, what are they looking for?
Yeah, great question. So the field of engineering is super broad, right? So I described a little bit about what we do here at Cardinal Engineering Associates, but there are engineers that do all kinds of things, from whether you're building cars and rockets, or you're designing, electronics and computers, or you're doing all kind of smart devices that communicate with each other. The buzzword Internet of Things has been a big buzzword for the past 5 years or so. And you have engineers working in that realm. You have computer science engineers, software engineers. So basically, when you boil it all down, even though engineering is such a broad field, if you just want to kind of simplify it, you can state it. I think the best way I've ever heard it been stated was by one of my professors. And he said, listen, guys, it's pretty simple. Engineers solve all the world's problems using common sense and numbers. So I know a few people that might disagree with that. Like, hey, I'm in the problem solving business as well, whether you're selling title insurance or whatever it is, but that's the bottom line, is we use common sense and numbers and research science, and we solve problems. That's it.
Well, I love that. I mean, if everybody's got problems, we've all got problems, and we all
everybody's got problems.
I love that. That's awesome. So when do you think when people are looking for an engineer, what are the key aspects? Like, when they need to bring someone like you into the fold, what are those situations looking like? And just what are those different types that if someone needs something, when should they call you?
Right. So there are a few different situations where you might call a firm like ours, and it's almost always centered around something dealing with buildings. So especially in Florida, even for a home design, a new home design, or even a renovation, you need to get a professional design person on board so that the building department will approve for you to make those changes, right? And so when I say a professional, a design professional, that's going to be either an architect, a licensed architect with the state of Florida, or a licensed engineer. I happen to be a licensed engineer. I have my professional engineering license. It's a fairly thorough process for either an architect or an engineer to get their license with their respective boards. And so for an engineer, you have to get an accredited degree. You have to pass the fundamentals of engineering exam. And what that allows you to do is that allows you to study or work under a licensed engineer. And then you have to do that for 4 years. And then after that, you get to sit for and take another test called the professional engineering exam.
Exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's nerve-wracking because they're long exams. They're an 8-hour test, usually given on a Saturday. So once you pass that, then you can receive your professional engineering license. So you get your degree, you pass the first test, you get 4 years of experience, and then you pass your second test, and then that's how you get your license. But if you want to get a permit to build a new building or make any kind of major renovation to an existing building, you have to have either an architect or an engineer, or depending on the size of the building, sometimes both.
Absolutely. So new construction is a huge thing in our community here along the Treasure Coast right now, especially in Port St. Lucie, but more so now in Martin County too, is building up quite a bit now. So when it comes to those aspects of new construction, how do you fit into that piece of the pie? Like, so if someone's getting a new construction on a house, I feel like a lot of times those construction companies, they have everything right there for them. Is there a way for you to be able into that, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for a lot of homes, for a spec home, that would have already been designed by either an architect or an engineer. Everything's already been approved according to state regulations and state building codes, right? Yeah. Which Florida has some special building codes because we are a hurricane prone area. So there's special provisions that you have to make in a Florida building because we have to design to that high wind standard, right? But when it comes to a spec home, one that's already been designed, usually you don't have to get that re-engineered or an architect to re-sign and seal those. So that's one scenario. Now, that doesn't mean it's not a good idea to bring an engineer on board, because there are situations where paying the extra design fee or engineering fee on a design that's already been completed might actually save you money in the long run. And so I'll give you an example of that.
Please do.
Yeah, right. So everybody likes to save money. So let's say the home was designed with a typical air conditioning unit. It's called a DX system, or a direct exchange unit. That unit is designed so that once the temperature meets a certain threshold, the air conditioner kicks on, it cools it to that temperature, and then it turns off until it meets that threshold again. Yeah. Right? So it's either on or off. Now they have more sophisticated systems and that are called VRF, variable refrigerant flow, where these systems don't necessarily they're not either on or off. They can ramp up or ramp down. And what that does is it allows you not to have to suck a lot of energy all at one time to try to keep your house cool. So it does two things. One, it keeps the temperature more consistent. But two, it ends up using a lot less energy. And the cost of those systems are getting more and more affordable. So for most of them, there is a higher upfront cost in the equipment. But if you have an engineer come on board, he can do what we call a total cost of ownership study, or total ownership cost study, and let you know, okay, if you get this system, it's going to cost you X. And if you get this system, it's going to cost you Y. However, the energy bills over a certain amount of years is going to cause the more expensive system to actually be less expensive than the less expensive system initially.
So that's something that they would kind of like reach out to you to get that advice from, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I think when you talk about some of the benefits of getting an engineer involved, even when legally you may not have to, because there are legal situations where you just have to, right?
Yeah.
The state won't allow you to do certain things without a licensed design professional involved. But even when you're in a situation where you don't have to get an additional licensed professional involved, it still could be to your benefit in the long run to do that. And one is, as an engineer, like I said, problem solvers, we like to come up with innovative solutions. Sometimes the problems you're not even aware you have, or it's a better solution to a problem that you might already have solved for you, like the air conditioning thing. Another thing is information. So you might have a contractor who wants to build the building, help you achieve your project or whatever, and he's proposing X, but you can get an engineer on board to let you know, okay, he's proposing X, but you also have these options Y and Z available to you, and the cost differences are going to be about this, and these are the benefits for each one.
Very interesting. So when it comes to examples, like let's say you yourself, are you the one that's actually building out and mapping out a design for a property if that's what someone needs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's give an example of a renovation. Let's say someone wants to turn their garage into a home office, which during these types of times, more and more people are starting to do that kind of thing. We have a lot of people doing remote work, even if when all of this is over, even if you have people go and work out at a separate office on a regular basis, I think home work is going to be a big part of our lives moving forward.
Absolutely.
Right? So when it comes to that type of thing, you'll have to get a design professional involved. We'll come out there, we'll take some measurements, we'll see your existing conditions. We'll send the homeowner or the customer or the client a report saying this is what we found. And then according to your project goals, we'll give you a couple different options. And then we can give you a couple different estimates on what we think contractors might charge you to do it, and then the benefits of each.
Very cool. So what if a house has foundation problems? Is that something that like is kind of in your neck of the woods, or no? Or is that just something that you get connected with someone, or how does that work? Just because I've heard about some issues like that. Sorry.
Yeah. And they're not totally uncommon, especially when you're talking about older homes. There's different types of foundations. Sometimes you can have on a slab on grade foundation, you'll have the soil erode out from under it. So you can have some issues with settling there. Or if you have expansive soils, which is basically just clay, they absorb water and can swell up and down unevenly. So you can have foundation issues there. And then a big type of foundation that tends to have issues, and it's for various reasons, is when you have pure foundations that are made out of cinder blocks, and you see these wooden homes just sitting up on cinder blocks. They'll settle differentially, or maybe you have to add a few piers. But yeah, that's something that someone like our firm would handle.
Okay, sure. Very interesting. So when you talk about someone who is there a specific type of person that's usually reaching out to you, or like there's a certain type of people that you serve per se? Like who is your target audience, I guess?
Yeah, so right now we have a couple of different target audiences, and I would say we have three main customers, and I'll say them in order of the amount of hours our company spends on each. So for us specifically, the main man hours that we spend are for clients who have large campuses. And a lot of times these campuses have aging infrastructure. So we have a couple of big clients, the Breakers Hotel in Palm Beach, FP&L, who of course has buildings all over the state. And then there's this building that IBM used to own, and it's not owned by them, hasn't been for years, but it's a huge facility down in Boca called the Boca Research Innovation Campus. They're actually the largest commercial facility south of Atlanta. So all these facilities, they have aging infrastructure, and they're at a place where you need a lot of replacements. So a lot of engineering redesign is happening on all of these, and that's where we spend a large portion of our time. I wouldn't necessarily say most. Then the second biggest type of client that we have are architects. So you have an architect coming in that they've been contracted by a customer to do a renovation on a home, or they've been contracted by a building owner to do a renovation on a big commercial facility or even an industrial facility. And they'll use us for our expertise on HVAC systems, for air conditioning and heating, air control in general, and electric systems and plumbing systems. Okay. Right. And then the last type of client that we deal with, and we're dealing with a lot more frequently nowadays, is the homeowner. The homeowner who's looking to get a renovation done, or they're looking to make some kind of upgrades to their home, and sometimes even a client who is looking to build a custom home will hire us so that we can get them a set of plans to help meet all their project goals.
Very cool. So what about additions? I guess that would be added into there too?
Oh yeah, 100%. And there are a lot of people that are wanting to do this now, and even auxiliary buildings. As Airbnb becomes more popular and people are realizing that these can sometimes be a really good investment, they're reaching out to people like us who can help them get an auxiliary building built in their backyard, so that they can have some additional income.
Very cool. Well, I'll just purchase a shed, and then can you just like make it awesome?
Yeah. So actually I used to be really into that whole idea. Now here's the one issue, and I would recommend that anybody considering doing that, turning a shed into a tiny home, reach out to an architect or engineer first. Reach out to us, and we'll talk about the different challenges that you'll meet there, right? So one of the big challenges that you run into with converting a shed into a living space or an occupied space is that, according to the building codes, you have to have a certain amount of moisture and air barrier protection, right? And usually those sheds don't come with that type of stuff. So in order to install it, you actually have to remove all the sheathing, all the outside skin, so to speak, and you have to layer it and wrap it with this. You've probably seen it as houses are going up, like Tyvek wrap, or maybe you've seen the zip sheathing, like that green board, and sometimes brown board that goes on the edge and sides of houses. So you have to wrap it in that stuff and then put your sheathing back up. So it can get sometimes it can actually be more expensive to do a shed and get it to meet building codes than if you just build the thing from scratch.
Yeah. And tiny homes are a huge thing right now. Have you guys had any projects with that here locally?
Well, I really want to get into it. The only kind of projects we've had with tiny homes have been my own personal projects. So as I can kind of get the word out there, I'd love to work with people on that stuff. I think there's they're definitely, again, talking about engineering, we give you information, benefits and drawbacks and costs and stuff like that. There are definitely some big benefits and drawbacks too to living in that type of lifestyle.
That's really cool. No, yeah. And I mean, I think that's just been like a huge thing lately, with that whole trend of people talking about like that with the tiny homes. So, I mean, even I would be interested to see like what are the costs for a tiny home and such like that. So,
yeah, and one of my big kind of things that has irked me a little bit with the tiny home movement is if you go and watch any of like the YouTube videos or any of the documentaries that have been done on this. I mean, shoot, and I know it's different for us because we live in Florida and the cost of housing maybe is not as expensive as it is in California or Australia, where you see a lot of these videos being made. But the thing that irks me a little bit is you see these tiny home builds and they're like, okay, what was your all-in cost? 150,000. What?
No.
Right? That's not solving the problems that we have.
How about 50,000?
Yeah, exactly. So when you look at something like that, I just shake my head and say, no. There's a better way for sure. There's a better way for sure. But you have to kind of do your research and know what you're looking for. One of the big issues that can actually come up in living small, which I'm a pretty big fan of, is air quality. So there's this saying that we have in environmental engineering and in environmental science in general: the solution to pollution is dilution, right? So you have too much of a high concentration of something, you just thin it out, right? When your house doesn't smell the way you want it to, what do? You air it out. It doesn't mean 100% of all of that thing causing the smell is gone. It just means you've diluted it so much to where it's a lot better. So why did I even mention that with tiny homes? Obviously, with a tiny home, there's not a lot of space to dilute it, right? So if you have some kind of substance that's giving off particulates in the air that can cause really bad air quality, you've basically concentrated it in a little small space. So that's something that you really have to think about when you're choosing that type of lifestyle. By the way, big shout out to your previous guest, Wendy Conrad, was it?
Yeah, she's so sweet. I love her.
Oh, man, what a cool person. I mean, just seeing you guys vibe together on that last interview, I thought was amazing. And the reason that I thought of it just now was you guys talked about the differences in what millennials value versus maybe previous generations.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about the tiny home movement, the reason I think that it's so attractive to millennials, because that seems to be who's pushing it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the reason I think that's so attractive to millennials is to, we don't want to, it's not that we want a closet this big and no clothes, but what we do want is we want freedom.
Yeah. Affordability, freedom. We want to be able to use our discretionary income, I'd say, for different purposes than what I don't think the lavish lifestyle is as wanted by the millennial. Would you agree? I think
absolutely. I would say that we looked at maybe the previous generation before us whose mantra was like, work hard and be successful, and really put a lot of emphasis on their identity with status, achievement. And we're saying, no, we definitely want to work and do something meaningful, but I don't want my entire life to be wrapped around that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to work to live. I don't want to live to work,
Yes. Oh, I see you're quoting me, huh? I love that. No, it's truly true. And I think that there's going to be a lot of changes just in the sphere of things when it comes to that. And, those tiny homes are one of the pieces of the pie. So it'll be exciting to see like how that kind of trends out and how things develop with that. But then again, we live in an area where, maybe that's not something that's going to come into our area right away because we have less of a population of younger people here. Like we have a higher population of older people, but like in St. Lucie County, what do they just get, like best place to retire, like top 10 places to retire in the US?
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily scream tiny home, does it?
No, but I mean, there's so many, you never know, it could transition in a sense, because a lot of times when people get older, they end up going into like smaller spaces too. So that might be another piece, like once it starts to filter into our society, like the tiny homes in the younger populations, it might be something that ends up being wanted by the older generation as well, because they're like, oh, well, that's what I'm doing already. And like, if I can do it in a more effective way, why not? Right.
So there's this big push over in the UK that I've read about online and seen a couple of YouTube videos related to, and it's starting to pick up. If YouTube is any indicator, and I don't know,
It is.
but it seems like it's starting to pick up in California as well, of this idea called granny flats, right? And it's nothing super new. We've all heard about mother-in-law suites forever.
Mm-hmm.
But me personally, I think it's kind of a travesty a little bit that we are okay so many times with sending our parents or our elderly into an assisted living facility, when there are other options out there. So when you're talking about tiny homes, when you're talking about retirees, I've heard many stories of people actually following their parents down to Florida. They used to live up north, and then their parents moved here. They still wanted to be close to their parents. They were tired of the cold, so they moved down here as well. I love the idea of building a tiny home in your backyard so that you can move your parents into, maybe your mother or father or whoever. And that way they still have their independence, they still have their freedom. But by gosh, if they don't feel like cooking that night, they can come eat with you. And,
Yeah.
If anything happens, you don't have to drive 30, 45, 2 hours away or take a flight, which I've actually had to do, take an emergency flight to Atlanta, for a parent who suddenly got ill. You can run to your backyard and be there to help them right away. I think even if tiny homes don't pick up as a lifestyle for young people, because maybe we don't have as many here, I think tiny homes in the backyard for a granny flat or a mother-in-law suite to move your parent into, I think is fantastic. And by the way, you can help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a great idea. And I think that, a lot of times that happens where they're sending them to those assisted living facilities because there's just not enough space in their home, or there's not enough, a lot of people, they want their privacy in the sense with if like they're a growing family, and it's hard either, especially in our market right now with how crazy things are, it's hard to be able to find a big enough space for like your whole family and your mother or your father that you're taking care of. So that's a great solution to a problem that's out
I'm
there.
not the only one that listens, huh?
No, you're not. So I think that's awesome. So do you have an idea of what the tiny home like square footage is? Like, do you know what the normal one is by chance? I know that's a random question, but
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've been talking about it for the past few minutes. So there are different ideas out there. Me personally, I don't see anybody calling a tiny home if it's over 600 square feet. There's some people that say 400 square feet is kind of the maximum that you could say a tiny home would be.
Okay. All right. And then is that like, are there dual layer ones, like 2 layered ones?
Yeah, of course. You can have a two-story tiny home,
or like a loft area, I guess, in there or something like that. Yeah.
That's right.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm glad that we got to discuss that a little bit and like the trends of how that's kind of changing and such. I think that's a very interesting concept to like add into and know that you can help with that as an engineer.
Absolutely. And it's right. It fits very perfectly with the type of work that we do, because again, we're in the building science, building engineering realm. Like I said, tons of different types of engineering. This is what we do. And so when it comes to tiny homes, it's a perfect fit for us. And it happens to be something I'm kind of passionate about because I think it solves a couple of significant problems that our society experiences.
Absolutely. I have to agree. Well, is there anything anything else that you want to share with everyone out there and just get the word out in a sense, like maybe some issues that you've been seeing come up that people really haven't paid attention to, but you see from your perspective as an engineer, or anything else you want to share?
So one thing I would mention for sure is get an architect or engineer on board before you start making changes to your home. Because I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, 99% of the time, it's going to be less of a headache, less of stress on you as the owner if you reach out to us beforehand for a couple reasons. One, we might be able to give you much better ways of doing things, right? Two, is eventually the municipality, in the building code, it's called the authority having jurisdiction. They're going to find out that you're doing stuff, and they're going to require that you get an engineer or architect on board. And a lot of times it ends up being more expensive for you to go back and fix something than it would have been for you to just get a professional involved ahead of time. So that would be the biggest thing. Yeah, reach out to us, run some ideas by us, even if you don't end up retaining an engineer or architect. A lot of times, just a simple conversation, you can get some really good information on what direction you want to head in as a homeowner.
Awesome. I love that. No, and I think that you have become such a resource for me. Me and you have talked so much. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and everything. So if they want to get a hold of an engineer per se, how should they do that, Larry?
Oh, absolutely. So you can go to our Facebook page, Cardinal Engineering Associates, and we're located in Florida. That's where we do all of our work. And also you can go to our website, ceaengineers.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And that is also in the description of this video for all of you guys who are watching. So you guys can reach out to him. I think I put your phone number in there as well. Reach out to Larry and get that information for whatever you've got going on in the stream of engineering. Thank you so much for just explaining it a little bit more. I think that after this conversation, like, people probably have a more well-rounded idea of what you do as an engineer, but what engineers do as a whole too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you so much for having me on this segment.
Absolutely. So for those of you who are watching, thank you so much for watching this. Make sure that you reach out to Larry if you have any questions when it comes to engineering, and I'm sure he would be happy to connect you if he's not the person for you. I know he's got a bunch of connections that he can also refer you to, and just be a point of access for you guys. And if you guys don't know, then we do host this every week, the Local Spotlight, spotlighting local businesses on the Treasure Coast that really make our Treasure Coast special. So, Lucy McGuire with Aero Title Services. We will see you guys again next week for another episode of the Local Spotlight. Make sure you guys stay tuned on our Aero Title Services Facebook page and YouTube channel, and like, subscribe, and all of that jazz. And we will see you guys again next week. Thank you again, Larry. Have a great one.
Thank you, Lucy. Bye.